Hello and welcome to another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. My name is Mike Bordenaro. I'm the Executive Director of the Asset Leadership Network, and today we have Marty Rowland in a very specific and wide-ranging conversation about the sociology of asset management and actually the economics and sociology of asset management. But before we start talking to Marty, I want to thank our organizational members, our patron members, Jacobs, Definitive Logic, a Mantech company, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and all of our organizational members who make this event and events like this possible. And before we bring in Marty, some of the other events that we have going on is a series of web programs on the ISO 55000, 55001, 55010, 11, and 12 documents that will be published this year. So we're going to have people talking about those. We've got Jack Dempsey on February 29th, talking about the why of asset management standards. And we've got another edition of the Port Storm. Port Storm 2 will be happening, and that's shaping up really nicely, although it hasn't been defined in terms of dates. And one of our members, CGI, our new member, Kahua, a project management software company, will be having an event in Washington, D.C. in April. And we're continuing with our legislative efforts, and things are shaping up really good this year. But we're excited to talk with Marty because he wears a lot of different hats. He is generous to be the ALN Senior Fellow, focused on sociology and economics, but he is also a special edition editor of the Journal of Economics and the American Journal of Economics and Sociology. We'll be talking about that. And he's on the board of the Henry James School of Social Science, Henry George School. And I have been putting links, but not into the right place. So here are some links that are to some of the things that Marty is. So Marty, if you can come on. Welcome. It's good to be talking with you again. We usually say, how do you get to where you're at in this point in your asset management journey? But let's just go to talking briefly about your different hats. Henry James School of
Henry George.
Henry George. James is the author. I keep messing that up. Thank you for not taking it personal. You're on the board there, the School of Sociology in New York. Can you tell us a little bit about that role?
Yeah. So I'm on the board of the Henry George School of Social Science, and that involves giving input on the programming that the school gives in terms of the educational output and our philosophy.
And that philosophy is well established at the turn of the century, and it's based on valuing land and taxing land.
Yeah, so that's the focus that Henry George had. He had a few other ideas, but his main idea was that there needs to be a collection of community-generated wealth, and that is done through taxing land values. So his ideal program would be that nobody would own land, and by not owning the land, that there would be an authority that would more easily collect land values. But if people own land, like most countries have, in
Yeah,
place.
that's gonna
What,
be what
what,
happens in America, that's
yeah.
for sure.
What you do is you have a property tax system where you differentiate between land value and the building value. And for example, the city of Detroit is seriously considering raising the land value portion, and thereby create a boom in that struggling city. So that's essentially the background on what Henry George is all about. And
But you've explained it to me in a way that I think kind of resonates. That if a bridge is going to be built across the river, the value of the land on the other side of that river is going to increase. And
yeah,
it's the increase in that value of that land that can be taxed to help pay for the bridge, which is
yeah,
going to increase the value of that land.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, one of the things I always bring up is that the way that Henry George's plan was killed in so many places, what the people who are opposed, who might be land speculators, would always go to the farmers and say, "This Henry George guy is out there to take your money." So, we're not trying to take money out of land that maybe we say it should be, held to a different purpose, but it's more of you know, land uses that are viable. Probably a better example than a bridge would be a train station, like the Long Island Railroad that goes all the way out to the Hamptons. There's so many stations that the land value is well, it should be very high, but they make very little use, just kind of like concrete parking lots. But those lands are terrifically valued if they would, for example, put in maybe affordable housing or maybe some kind of manufacturing hub, because it's sometimes like a 30-minute ride into Manhattan, and people live up to an hour in New Jersey to get to Manhattan. So there's an opportunity to um, either own that land around those stations, which like Singapore does, or Tokyo, or Hong Kong, and it kind of self-funds the whole railroad system. So
and through a transparent asset management initiative, the marriage of those non-traditional societal funding mechanisms could avoid that land speculation issue that you said was prevented this beneficial initiative.
yeah,
So that's why we like the idea of marrying asset management to sociological and economic approaches. So
yeah.
that brings us to you being asked to be the special editor of the American Journal of Economics and Sociology. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, so I was given the opportunity to step in as the person who had been doing that job wanted to retire, since he's been doing it for close to a decade. And the journal started in 1941 by a person who was an active Georgist in the tradition that we just spoke about. And so over the years, the journal has provided an opportunity for people to write papers about topics that the journal would cover. But it was never intended that the topic of the papers that would be in the journal would all be about Henry George. It was intended to have a wide viewpoint of about a subject, and then of course the editor can always come back and make comments about the various papers and what it all means. So when I had that opportunity, the first uh, issue that's coming out was called Rent and Labor Exploitation, and it's going to have 13 papers in this, and it's coming out really soon. So that was kind of fun. Had a real good response for the first one. The one that's coming out within the next 3 or 4 months is about climate change. And there still is an opportunity for people to submit a paper on climate change, the various aspects of that. If
The
there is.
sociological and economic aspects of that.
Yeah, well, I identified five viewpoints of the climate issue. And first one is the United Nations, I think it was the head, said that it's no longer global warming, it's about global boiling. So it's kind of like um, maybe a heightened appreciation of what the threat is. So that was one viewpoint. Another viewpoint would be if you were, say, a speculator, you would say, well, all these people are worried about their properties being devalued, so let me go buy them up, and in the meantime, before the disaster hits, I can make a killing. So that was kind of like opportunist aspect of social, or I mean, the climate issue. And then, of course, we got the loss and damage concern of the people in the global South who feel that it's the North countries of the world that polluted the air, and now here we are being asked to cut back on pollutants, but we're still poor and we're still developing, so somebody owes us some money. So I'm encouraging people to write a paper about that, because I think there is some value to having that point of view. And then
Before you move on from that,
Yeah.
let's just talk about air as an asset.
Air.
And one of the things that the ALN developed in conjunction with the Asset Management Council is the value and benefits of asset management web series. And I was honored last year when Sally Nugent and Peter Kohler asked me, why are we doing this? They wanted me to come up with the why statement. And I said, we are facing a world of problems as a single human race. And it seems crazy to think that one thing can help everyone. But if every organization in the world improves the management of their assets, we may have a chance. We may not, but we haven't heard anything as clearly and concisely stated as what was just said. So until we hear about something else, we're running full speed ahead with asset management. And your statement about the developed nations causing the majority of the pollution problems that are messing with our air, which is a single resource for everyone who breathes, what you're saying is legitimate, and we encourage people to write an article for your journal.
Yeah, that's great. I hope that people do. Yeah, one of the things that we were working on, I guess we're still working on, is on the importance of forests. One of the, I guess where I come from in terms of my political viewpoint on climate change is that I'm essentially a skeptic to the point of if the world is coming to a screeching halt and we're all going to die, it should be incumbent on all of us to stop the chopping down of trees and to be more wise about how we manage trees. I recently wrote a paper for the Henry George School of Social Science, and I made that point that all major countries in the world that have forests all have subsidies given to chop down trees. And we know that we harvest trees to put into homes, and we continue to burn wood. But to me, it seems psychotic that we have, on the one hand, this global alarm about emissions, but we're doing little to nothing about the one thing that could moderate or mitigate CO2 concentrations. So I'm not being a denier. I'm just saying, if there's such a concern, why is there such, well, like what you said, the lack of asset management. It's kind of like, well, somebody might own all these assets, but the asset that we're talking about and globally is the air and the impacts that might be happening because we're not managing the assets.
So you said it seems psychotic, and I would like to correct you. It is psychotic. And that's what we have found out about asset management. The technology works, the process works, this ISO standards or whichever standard, they work. It's a matter of leadership influencing culture improvement. And yeah.
Well, you know, another thing I wanted to bring up is that I think you're bringing up a very good point about ownership and being able to act in a rational way. And if we all define what our stake is, we can go toward an idea of like cooperation. And one of the topics that I get into when I lecture with the Henry George School is to define the difference between what we call the science today of economics before the turn of the century of you know, the 1900 or the 1800s to the 1900s. It was all about political economy, and political economy is all about cooperation and the advance of civilization. We get away from that when we talk about economics because it's kind of like a value-free pursuit of selfishness, and it really didn't advance the science by taking that point of view. So I'm always pointing out Henry George's view that it's got to be a political science that we pursue, and to the well, away from the current dominant view of, you know, economics, society, science of economics.
I'm very happy to report that when we finally met with a legislator, we met with the Wyoming Senator Cynthia Lummis, and she very quickly understood asset management and said, I can get behind that. And she's willing to participate with a number of our senators in requesting the U.S. Government Accountability Office do a report on the asset management impact in MAP 21 transit and highway legislation, which has specific requirements for an asset management plan in order to get funding. And so the request would then have sociological and political science impacts, because we are very confident that there will be a positive report about the impact of asset management language and funding asset management training that would then suggest other legislation also have requirements for asset management plans and have money to educate people about how to create these asset management plans.
Yeah,
Let's keep that going.
Yeah, that's really good news. And that kind of also falls in line with other activities I have with the ASTM organization, where in 2020, I had a standard published, a standard practice published called Infrastructure Management. And it's within the committee called Asset Management. And what I do in that standard is identify the various tangible and intangible infrastructure assets, and make it, it requires that the constituents of our elected leaders have input, community engagement on the assets that we have, who pays for them, how much we need, what's the performance. And I see that being cited in those plans that you were just pointing out with the legislator. You know, we could put that language in the legislation that they conform to the E3210 infrastructure management. I think that that would be a big boon.
I just put that link in the chat for everyone. And Jim Dieter, CEO and chairman of ALN, sees that looking into ASTM 3210 and explaining it and giving it more attention is something that he's interested in doing this year.
Yeah, that's great. I'll be mentioning it in my talk on February 21st. So anybody interested in the talks I'm giving in the next week, I got one on the 19th of February. I'm going to be talking about the money question in terms of what Henry George thought in banking. And then on the 21st, I'm giving a talk on climate issues and how they're related to asset management.
And I just put Dr. Marty's email in the chat. So if you want information on those, you can reach out to him. I never knew that he had that email address. So this is a special audience that gets into his private communications. So with the time we have remaining, let's talk about the tiny forest movement and what the Asset Leadership Network is doing to write a paper for the journal that will be coming out. Oh, will you talk about the fall journal?
Yeah, we can talk about that. We shoot for November 2024, but we can adjust the date. But we are looking for people to write papers on the social aspects of asset management, and we talked about a few of them, but I think people are free to come up with their how they want to approach that.
And they can email me or Dr. Marty 8 at gmail.com. There's not 8 Dr. Martys, it's just Marty's favorite number. So, and what we have started is the Tiny Forest cryptocurrency initiative in the Asset Leadership Network. And Marty helped us identify a tiny forest movement because he was talking earlier about forest and treating forests as assets. And that can seem overwhelming when much of Canada burned, much of California burned. There is so many fires that are burning these trees. How can we do anything when the destruction is on that scale? Well, we came up with an approach that would teach people about the value of trees economically and sociologically in a comprehensible manner. And Marty identified that there's this tiny forest movement. Dr. Miyawaki in the 1970s in Japan developed an approach where you densely plant shrubs, mid-layer trees, and canopy trees in a small area. And you tend it very carefully for 2 years. And in the 3rd year, you no longer have to pay, you don't have to water it, you don't have to weed it, you don't have to take care of it. The plants and bushes compete for sunlight so intensely, they grow extra quick. And in 20 years, you have a growth level that is more commonly known for a 100-year-old forest. And when they say tiny forest, they say 6 parking spaces can be this, the spot. So just think in your mind, 6 cars, and they're calling that a tiny forest. Now, how can a tiny forest like that help the world? Well, as Marty points out in one approach, yes, thank you for writing that article or chat about the tiny forests. Yeah, we're going to use that in our references in our article that we submit. And the idea is that a tiny forest itself is not going to have the impact on a global scale. It will change the temperature inside the tiny forest compared to the other area. There will be more oxygen around the tiny forest. There'll be less carbon. But the idea is to start teaching people about managing assets, getting value from the 6 parking spaces that wasn't there before. And if we can teach people that we can do it in these small doses, then we can impact the society to say, hey, why don't we do this for an entire acre or this empty lot or these other areas? And why don't we measure this and show the value? And then by tying a cryptocurrency to the growth of the trees, the reduction in temperature, the increase in oxygen around it, then there are measurable values to increase the currency that is distributed to people who are tending these forests. And it's a theoretical exercise, but by publishing it in the American Journal of Economics and Sociology, we might attract the attention of some billionaires who want to do this. We've got connections through our network to the cryptocurrency world, and there is interest in this. So thanks, Marty, for giving us a platform to explore this.
Yeah, yeah. So that was actually it all started when I was participating in a conference call with another ASTM organization, and the person that you were mentioning, name escapes me right now, but he was
Sobendu.
Yeah, Sabendu. He was speaking about asset management as regards to ESG a standard that was being written. And so I got to meet him and got to understand where he's getting from, but where he's coming from. But I think the answer to the question about how can we go from a tiny forest to something bigger is the effort, for example, of replanting as much as we need to in Canada, for example. Maybe there's a better approach so that in the future those large areas don't burn up the way that they did. And it might be a matter of having breaks between stands of forests. And with that in mind, then you start to see that from a tiny forest perspective, you might have square miles of forests that are managed maybe in a larger way, but with the same mindset. And what you mentioned about cryptocurrency, there would be a value placed on that active management, and people who work to accomplish that might earn rather than money, would be getting the cryptocurrency, and maybe that could be traded locally for, who knows, for housing and whatever else they need to exist on. So I think there's a great opportunity, because some people will take the cryptocurrency and just throw it around as a badge of look at all the good work I'm doing, and I think when you start measuring, for example, measuring the sequestration capacity that's increased, it's pretty readable, a ready-made way of showing what that value is. So I'm really excited about the tiny forest. One of the things that not maybe not advertised as much is that in some of these forests, like in the Amazon and up in Canada, there's a net loss of sequestration capacity just because of mismanagement. So we might think that we're getting a handle on CO2 in the atmosphere, but when you actually measure, you find out something different. So that's really the key part of the whole tiny forest movement is stop imagining what you have and actually measuring it. And if you're not getting what you think you are, then there's a need to change what you're doing and do it in a more systematic and provable way.
So Marty, so many good things have occurred since you got us pursuing this trees as an asset approach. And one of them was finding out that with LIDAR and NIDAR, planes can fly over forests and not only measure the size of the trees, the girth of their trunks, even the branches, they can detect the deadfall on the ground and determine which areas are more susceptible to have fallen trees fuel a fire and therefore need to be cleared out. And the great thing about tiny forests is it helps us take this huge concept of trees as a global asset into something people can get their hands around and start to understand. Because when you think of globally, it's mind-boggling. But if we can just focus on tiny forests, we can learn the things that are necessary and scale up accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that always comes up, and it's a good point, is that some areas aren't suitable for forests. So, so that's an important part of tiny forests is where do you put them? Who's going to manage them? Who's going to monitor them? And I guess that's part of the crypto concern because you're trying to add value. So if you've got something that it's not good soil, for example, then don't even start to do that. But there's certain areas where we grow crops for food. So unless we got enough food, then maybe there's another area that needs the forest. So
the great thing about the tiny forest movement that you connected us to is that there are hundreds of existing tiny forests. So when we work with Subhendu Sharma, who is the leader of this movement, and let them know that they can register their existing tiny forests, then we can immediately have a very big database of forests to measure. So that's part of the theory.
Yeah, if you could put a link to Subhendu's website, it's called Afforestation, or is it?
Afforestation. Yeah, afforestation is growing trees where there are no trees currently. But yeah, I've got that, and I'll.
It's kind of interesting to think of the taking trees as an asset, and then we stop and think, well, what else can we do if we can tackle something that large? I haven't stopped to think about it, but once you are successful in one large project, I suppose you start to think twice about are problems unsolvable, or is it a matter of conceptualizing how to tackle them?
Yes, I finally got to it's just aforest 2fs2ts.com.
Yeah.
So we'll put that in the link or in the chat. It's very interesting. And do you have any closing comments?
Well, I guess I just want to thank everybody for listening in and showing interest in the projects that I'm working on and what Asset Leadership Network is working on. I think it's a very valuable organization with a good viewpoint, and I think we're going to be seeing 2024 being a banner year for all these activities, and I'm looking forward to getting these papers and putting out another request that we ask people for papers. There's still time to write a paper about a climate issue, but if you want to write about the social aspects of asset management, get a hold of me and Mike, and we can make sure that your paper gets published.
Well, thank you so much, Marty, for putting us in this very interesting and impactful direction. So thank you for your time this afternoon. And why am I not able to send that forward? I also want to thank our organizational members. And I just keep picking the wrong one to move forward on. So we'll go to our patron members: Jacobs, ABS Quality Evaluations, Definitive Logic, a Mantech company, Onuma, CGI, and all of our organizational members. We were very appreciative with the bump of membership we got because of our January 10th event. It was very successful, and it's so fun to work with asset managers. Jack Dempsey on January 10th started his program by saying asset managers are people who care. And we're gonna put that to a disco soundtrack and just get it out there and have people understand this very simple concept of what asset management is. People who care. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week on ALN Thursday at 3. Bye for now.
So the recording's off, huh?
No, still going, but we'll edit this out. Bye, everyone.